Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Growing Generations podcast show. This week we have episode number 9. So we have been streaming for over 2 months now, around there. And there is some things that will be changed when it comes to the podcast show, which will be announced later on next week. So make sure you stay tuned with that. So this week's topic, we're going to be discussing about flowers for winter interest. I know we are already breaking winter and we are spring is right around the corner, if not where some people are already in spring. And we're getting ready to start our spring gardens. However, I wanted to bring this topic along because I feel like this is a really cool topic to discuss, especially with many gardeners or many people thinking that the winter's just pure snow, it's just gray, there's no color in the garden. However, there is certain plants or flowers that provide winter interest. So this week's guest is my very good friend Jennifer over from Forever Blooms with Jennifer. We did do some collabs over on my main channel multiple times, but we haven't caught up on one recently, so I decided to have her as a guest on the show. So without further ado, let's go ahead and welcome Jennifer from Forever Blooms with Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. Hi.
Hi,
My name is Jennifer. I'm
Jennifer.
with Forever Blooms. I am from Southern New Jersey, Zone 7A. So that is sort of what I deal with. We have cold winters and very hot summers, high humidity. So not maybe not as hot as Florida, right? And not as humid as Florida most years. So hi, nice to meet everyone.
So me and Jennifer have done a few collabs, I think we did a few on my main channel before, and so I decided to bring her along into this week's episode for the main reasoning that she does very great gardening content, and I did see that she posts a few videos and posts etc. on some flowers she had growing in her winter garden. I know it varies. I know there's many plants. It's not only directed to flowers that give winter interest. I know there's other plants which we will discuss later on in this week's episode. And so let's go ahead and jumpstart this episode with the very first question I ask every single gardener who joins us on this live stream, which is, how did you start gardening?
So I started gardening in 2017. And the reason that I started gardening is because I bought an ugly house. I did. It had been abandoned for maybe, I don't know, 2.5, 3 years. We bought it as a fixer upper. We were pouring lots of money into the inside of the house to make it livable and good for like our family. And by the time everything was said and done, we didn't have a budget left over for any of the landscaping, and I really had not been into flowers before then, but I was just felt obligated to do it because I felt like my outside of the house needed to look nice as well. So I started to learn like cheap ways to do landscaping and flowers and stuff just to get something out. And I remember like the first time I grew anything by seed, I was obsessed. I was absolutely from the first moment captivated, obsessed. And then seed starting turned into like uh outdoor plant obsession, which turned into house plants, which then turned into getting a greenhouse, which then I was like, oh, I can do vegetables. And so I started to have a vegetable garden. So it all sort of snowballed into this. Oh, now I'm this just crazy plant lady of the neighborhood, which is wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely see many people doing that when they are not very interested in gardening, and then just some detail like landscaping in their house, or they see someone else doing gardening and they start off the simplest, more affordable ways to do gardening, and just they just keep progressing. They keep progressing over time, which is something I tend to see a lot. And so I know you do landscape planting. I know you do have a greenhouse. And I know the last time we spoke, you had what was it? It was like a raised bed garden.
Yeah.
I forgot what the name of it was. It was
It was a cedar raised bed garden
yeah,
from Gardener's Supply that I put together.
yeah. It
So I
was
have a
like
little bit
a
of everything. Yeah.
yeah. You had
Oh, you're talking about the veggie pods.
oh
Yes.
yeah, the veggie pod. There you go.
Yeah. So
There
if
you
you
go.
guys don't know, he's talking about these raised beds, but they have legs. You can buy them with legs so you don't have to bend over. And then, so it just looks like a big long raised bed that's level to you. And then the bottom has a water reservoir underneath, so you don't barely ever have to like water. I barely water my veggie pot. Whatever I put in there kind of survives on its own, which is great. And then it has a canopy on top, like a little netting, but it's in a cage, so it's like a tight netting. And then it has a water supply on the inside, so it just sprays water on your plants. So it's really easy care, which I love. So yes, he's talking about the veggie pods, which I love.
Yeah, the veggie pods. I know we discussed about that. I know I think it was the video that our moderator Jay put in the chat, which was showcasing her favorite plant for 2020. I don't know if it was that video, but I know one of the videos I invited you over, you showcased that you were growing kale in the veggie garden, and it was during your cooler seasons, which I thought that was really cool. I do have a raised, like a lifted raised bed from Sub Pod. Unfortunately, Sub Pod is no longer running. They had to close down, which was very, very sad. But I have worked it with them and I loved it because it was very easy to access. And so I know you had the veggie pods, and I was just like blown away on how well everything was doing in those veggie pods. Well, not to mention that great gardener, great gardener. So,
Thank you. That's so kind. Yeah. I mean, it's
so
really easy to be a good gardener with the veggie
yeah,
pod for sure.
yeah, veggie pods. Yeah. So moving on to the next question is, we are already moving into our growing season. Well, here in South Florida, we have all year gardening. We don't have a break because we don't have any winter. If not, winter is our favorable growing season. However, I know for people like in New Jersey and Oregon, when they're just starting to awake into spring, I know that once some gardeners enter that spring, it's full runner mode. It's like, let's go. And so, what are your plans for this growing season? Like, what's the plan out for this year?
This growing season is all about making it easy on myself. So last year, like I said, I had a lot going on at work. And I feel like I over planned and over committed early on, knowing that I would have a crazy summer because I had to do like take a big test for work in the summer. And I knew that I wouldn't be around. But of course, you did the thing that gardeners do, and we like plant everything anyway, and we buy the plants anyway, knowing we don't have anywhere to put them or you don't have time to plant them. And my garden wasn't, I mean, I had stuff that I was able to harvest, thank goodness, and it was still fun. Um, but just sort of allowing myself the grace and mercy to just slow down. And what that looks like for me is like plant, like this year, maybe one experimental plant, but everything else, let it be something that you actually eat, something that's easy to grow. So this year, it's going to be the staples. It's going to be the peppers. It's going to be the tomatoes. It's going to be, maybe some leafy greens. It's going to be, I love watermelon and squash. So I'm going to keep it very much this year, the plants in the vegetable garden that I eat and that are easy to grow and that I know how to grow. Maybe like a couple experimental plants, but that's it. In the ornamental garden, I am actually going to do one of my fence lines. I'm actually going to put a fruit tree in for the first time. Yes, yes. Like I should have done this years ago. But it's a nice size tree and it's going to give us fruit this year because it's a nice size tree. And we've already dug out the hole. We just got to go get some compost and starter fertilizer and put it in. And that whole fence line is going to be things that come back every year that give you,
Mhm.
and or flowers, but things that come back and it's sort of dedicated space. So like your grapevines, your fruit trees, your asparagus, that whole row is just going to be fun stuff that comes back every year. So that's my main plan, is to work on the back, because I feel like I have worked on the front a lot, and the back of my yard, my back garden has been sacrificed. So this year in the back, it's just all about going all out. So
Yeah, definitely. The same thing is over here. Like us gardeners have the tendency to know that we will have a busy year or a busy season coming up, and we completely ignore it. We just don't
we
care. We
don't
just
care.
we just plant it out. We're like, we got this. Comes time we don't.
Yeah.
So with on my side of the thing, on my end of the things, I have my nursery to go ahead and situate out. We had our grand reopening last week, and so we have a full season coming up ahead. I have the pages to post on. I have school that's coming to another wrap up year, and so I'm getting packed with work. And so what I did was the same thing. I let go of the high maintenance thing, and I just planted things that I just have to like ignore for them to thrive.
Yeah.
And so that's why I kind of switched over to agroforestry, because it's like I'm planting you. It's either you grow or die. Because if you die, I'll replace you with something else. And so it's just a constant thing that I'm growing or doing. And I have to agree that never be afraid of making changes in the garden. If you feel like it's a lot, tone it down a little bit. You could always have a break one year. Doesn't mean you have to completely stop. It's just you have to tone it down, bring it back a little bit, which is something that I definitely have to agree. So, moving into our next question, which is about the topic. So, I know when it comes to winter, well, for me, not like we have lots of heat and humidity. So, we have all year season interest. Some of the perennials that or annuals that are considered in other zones, like coleus, petunias, and stuff like that, they might grow as perennials here in South Florida because of our very long growing season. However, I know places like New Jersey and such not, they get snow. They get very cold. I don't think I'll survive in cold. Um, and so I know there is plants or flowers that offer winter interest, whether that be all winter, endings of winter, just they showcase their true colors, peak during their winter season. So, what are five flowers or plants or any type of plant that you've grown that has provided winter interest?
Sure. So you know that my ultimate like go-to winter interest plant is hellebores. I'll never stop going on and on about hellebores. So if you guys have never heard of the word hellebore, you might have heard of it as Lenten rose or helleborus. And it's basically a low-growing perennial plant with evergreen leaves. And then in the winter, flower stalks go up and bloom all different types of colors. You have single blooms, you have pointy edges, petals, you have double blooming with a really floofy, dark purple, almost black flowers, all the way to like bright, clear white flowers and everything in between. And they have different bloom times. Just as you would have a tulip that's an early blooming tulip that blooms when it's really, really, cold out, and then other ones that might, tulips that might bloom later on in the season. Hellebores are the same. So the reason that I love hellebores is, number one, they come back every year. Number two, they're tough as nails. I have a lot of areas that have dry shade, which is really easy, really hard to sort of find plants for. Hellebores love those conditions. So if you have a tree that sucks the moisture and life out of everything, and you have a hard time finding stuff that works, your hellebores will love it. Just stick a hellebore in there. And the flowers last forever. People will look at my hellebores and be like, "Oh my God, they're still blooming. It's like summertime. It's like early summer." And it's like, no, they're not still blooming. The dead flower stalks just they stay upright and they keep their color a lot of times. So they look like they're alive, but they're just, it's like a dry flower that dried on the spot. So number one is hellebores, because of everything that they offer. I just love them. Um, Primrose is another one. They come in all different types of colors. They're very low. They're only like maybe a few inches. So you just bunch of them together for a high impact. And they are also blooming in the winter time when you're just really eager to see something growing, in your garden, or you really miss your plants. Primrose are those pretty little dainty plants, and you can get them in a lot of places. They're pretty common, especially around Easter time. You see primrose in a lot of the garden centers around here, anyway. Camellias is the third one. So my camellias actually bloomed dead winter even before my hellebores bloomed. And camellias are basically evergreen bushes. Most of them are evergreen anyway. And they have these like rosette style flowers that come from little teeny tiny flowers all the way to like, big giant camellia plants. They're slow growing, so you have to be patient with them because they don't grow fast. And they're pricey when you go to the store, but they're beautiful and they give so much to the garden in the winter time. So that's at number three. The next one is plants with berries on them. So any kind of like evergreen that has a berry that holds on to them throughout the winter. If you plant them in mass, especially, they're really pretty. So I have a few areas that I have ground cover style um, holly type plants that have berries on them, and they look really good in the winter time. They're gonna still have to fill in, so I feel like the impact isn't fully there, but it'll get there. So that's four, and five is the most boring one, but it's an honest answer because I feel like people underestimate the power that they can bring in the structure they can bring to the garden. It's evergreens like boxwoods, sky pencil hollies, anything that stays green throughout the winter. You think that they're the boring plants that you don't want to spend money on, but let me tell you, when your rest of your garden has died back or your annuals have given up on you, that boxwood has your back. So it brings some structure into the garden and those are my five plants.
I definitely have to agree with every single one of the ones you mentioned, especially hellebores. Unfortunately, here in South Florida, we can't grow hellebores. I
It's not
guess,
cold enough in the winter,
yeah,
right?
it does not get cold enough for them to survive. Needless to say, if the opportunity comes where I'm able to grow one, I'm definitely will. Because I know that they come in like hundreds of colors and shapes and sizes. They're like so pretty, and I'm like a huge like black flower fan. And so once I saw like a photo, like I know Garden Answer also is a huge hellebore fan, and I know she showcased one that was like almost pitch black, and I was like, those are so pretty. And camellias as well. I had a early wonder camellia, I think it's called, from Southern Garden Living. That one did not make it. It did bloom for me. It did do really really well for me. But then I transplanted it because that's when I was doing my orchid house, and it did not survive. And so I do have to get a new one for my garden because I really really loved how they grew, as well as evergreens. You can't miss them. They're super super cool. Some of them like topiaries, etc., as well as like your winter berries, like holly berries, etc. All of those are great plants to grow during your winter seasons because they will give you looks when everything else is kind of dead. So I
Right.
definitely have to agree with every single one of them, especially those hellebores. Oh, I've just been wanting to have one, but I can't. And so I really, really love them, but I have to see other gardeners grow them. So, what are some tips or advice you could give to the gardeners who are getting ready to plant these plants for winter interest? What are some tips and advice you could give to them, like landscaping wise, care wise, etc.?
I would say that it's important for you to actually tour your garden in the winter because I think it's really easy to be like, I don't need any winter. And like, look at this beautiful June garden, this beautiful August garden or whatever. It's really easy to look at your garden when it's blooming and full and it's warm out and everything is out and about and in your face. It's hard to remember like what your garden looks like in the winter. So the biggest piece of advice that I could give people who want to have winter interest is to actually go out in your garden in the middle of winter and see what's lacking. And once you see how bad it looks in the winter, you will be motivated to buy that plant that you've been, sort of deciding, do I want it or do I not? The time to get that motivation going is now.
I definitely have to agree with you with that because some people might be like, it's the winter, like exactly like how you said it, that they won't really have a peace of mind when it comes to their winter interest because they're so caught up in their spring and summer interest that their garden is giving. Another tip I would like to involve into that is definitely once you're installing your main canopy layers or your like structural plants before any like perennials or annuals, definitely include your winter interest because that's where it would play a part of, especially your bigger trees like your evergreens or any type of your winter berries that get pretty big. That's where you want to install them. And then later on you could go ahead and install your winter interest for your like your perennials, which is the most important part, which is to properly lay out your landscape so nothing else is covering it, because you don't want to have like a winter interest all the way in the back and then like while everything's dead it's like so far that you can't barely see it. So I would recommend to definitely lay out your garden like Jennifer said. Go out of winter season, look at your garden, see how it's looking during the winter, how sad it's looking, and go out and plant your winter interest. If you have to wait a year to see how it looks, definitely do that, which is something I really really like when it comes to those tips. So speaking of planting these winter interests, what are like when it comes to a specific time period? Where well, like around what time throughout the year would you recommend for people to go through and plant these plants?
I think that depends on the type of plant that you buy. There are some plants that you can plant all year long and they're tough as nails and it wouldn't matter when you planted them. Um, but then there are other plants where you can only find them in certain seasons. Like good luck finding a hellebore that's in good condition in the middle of August, right? It's the middle of August. They have hydrangeas out at the garden centers. They don't have hellebores anymore. They have hellebores in February and March and April, and that's it. At least in my area. So sometimes you have to plant them when you can buy them. And what I do as an example is I get my hellebores in February and March. I decorate little pots and my planters, and I do the window boxes for Easter with them. And then when I'm done with them, I empty out the pots and the window boxes and I plant those things in the ground just in my landscape. And then the pots will just have your annuals in them, when May comes. So it really depends. And so other things prefer a fall planting and other things prefer spring. So, for example, for evergreens in my area, the instruction is always like fall time is better for big trees and shrubs and evergreens. Fall is better for that kind of fall interest. So, um, a lot of the times people will say that your garden center puts plants out around the time that would be good for them to be planted. So, for example, I have a fruit tree. I bought a nectarine. Those are out now because the garden centers know, especially if they're outdoor grown, that even though it's winter out still, it's very early spring here. They will survive in our area, and they are acclimated, and they're a good time to plant them is now. And then later on, they'll have big selections of shrubs and trees and big plants in the fall that like fall planting, or they'll have a big selection of bulbs. Talk about winter interest, right? A big selection of bulbs, and mainly they'll get them in the fall. So it depends on the type of plant.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree because, like Jennifer mentioned, it's definitely like the nurseries help you out a little bit. They will only introduce plants when they're ready to be planted out into the landscape. Because here, like here in South Florida, what they would do is that they won't have a petunia out during the summer because they will die. They will literally suffocate in our heat. So they would only have them out during our cooler seasons. So the nurseries definitely adjust their inventory based on the season it is and what could be planted during that time, which I definitely have to agree with, like bulbs, because there is thousands of bulb varieties and species you could choose from that that you're able to plant during the fall to give you like early, like there's some that bloom very early, and I know I have seen some gardeners who are like the like a certain time period in the year, like in the beginning of the year, they have their flowering bulbs already coming up and giving them color early on in the season. So I know that's definitely another one to definitely keep in mind when it comes to choosing your winter interest, is to definitely plant them and your nurseries have them out, which is definitely ideal. So moving on to the hundreds or thousands of plants you've grown in your gardening journey, what has like caught your attention? Which one is your favorite plant?
My favorite plant, like ornamental or vegetable. Do you care what category?
You can say one for each one. You can say a generic one. Up to you.
I would say, oh, hi. I see the vintage gardener is logged on.
Hi,
Hi.
Brooke.
Um, I will cheat and I will answer a question that you did not ask, but it goes with it. Okay, so my new surprise favorite plant. That's how I answer the question. The plant that I didn't really think that I would love, 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 that kept giving, giving, giving in the garden was because I was into cut flowers this past season and then the season before. And the flower that I always knew I could go out and pinch some flowers and make a little teeny bouquet of something was snapdragons. My snapdragons do really well in the garden, and I collected them from seed, and they actually made it all the way through the summer, and they were blooming all summer. And I had read online that they were, they like the cold weather, but they were thriving. And they always had flowers on them. Like I always could. And they're more of a filler. The ones that came up were from seed and they came up more like a filler plant. But they just, made me so happy because I always knew if I needed something, to little pop of color in between the dahlias I was growing, that I could add that as like a little filler. So I don't know that snapdragons are my favorite plant of all time, but they're like the surprise plant that I didn't know I needed.
Yeah, definitely. And because I know some people grow snapdragons that are like super tall. They're like they get very tall. And I like look at them and I am like astonished because the snapdragons we grow here, they're the small little like bush type ones. They're like the small little itty bitty ones that don't get too big. About they get like the biggest they'll get is like about a foot around there. But
Yeah.
I've seen some like snapdragons get crazy tall, and I am like jealous because I'm like I want those huge stalk of flowers in the garden. And so I definitely have to agree with you with that. Snapdragons come in many varieties. I know I've seen some colors of like mixed colors that some snapdragons come into. I don't have any right now, so I definitely need to get on that when it comes to snapdragons. So on the opposite spectrum, what's your least favorite plant?
Oh, I have an answer to this question because it's a plant that I wanted to love and I planted early on in my gardening journey. And I loved it that first year, and then it just got progressively uglier in my mind. And I'm like, why did you plant that? And it's a weeping cherry tree.
Oh,
The weep
okay.
the little umbrella type trees, and they bloom,
Yeah.
and then they have like this little waterfall effect. Um, I loved that tree when I bought it. Like I absolutely was obsessed with it. I went to like 3 or 4 different stores to buy the healthiest looking one. The biggest one I paid like, I forget, like $200 for it or something, 250 for it. And I planted it and it was, yay thick. And then now it's like this and it's big. But I don't know. It just has an erratic growth pattern at the top. For the first year, this year, it didn't bloom right. It got sick over
Oh.
past year, and it has like a little canker, some kind of, I don't know, it looks like a infection on the it, yeah, and it's in an odd area. Like it isn't growing the way I thought it would. It doesn't look right. And I thought I would love it. I was obsessed with it. And it ended up being like, we're probably going to cut it down and just like replace it with something
Oh
else.
wow.
And now we're having to pull it from the root or something because they sucker. That's the other thing.
Oof.
They sucker from the ground. So I just and they grow. They grow really long. You know how it has like that little
Yeah.
waterfall effect and it
Yeah.
comes down? Well, you're supposed to keep them trimmed up and it looks neater. Otherwise, it just kind of looks like a big mess. But what they don't tell you is it's not like you're trimming it up even once or twice a season. I mean, I could go out there every 3 weeks in
Oh
the
whoa.
season and have to trim that thing back. Like it's too much maintenance for me. It just grew too fast and not in the way that I wanted it to. So it's a lesson, like to me, that it's okay to not like things that you thought you were gonna love in your garden, and to just be done with them. You don't love it, buy something else, girl. Like you love buying plants, so go buy something else that looks better.
Yeah, it's definitely like a weeping cherry tree sounds so spectacular. It sounds so pretty. But I know there's some things in the garden that you're gonna like, wow, I'm gonna love this in the garden, comes to the final moment, and you're kind of disappointed in a way. And so the same thing happened with me around like I've been trying it every single year, which was the I don't know if you've seen them, which is like the white scallop squash or the patty pan squash. Like
Yes.
it's the super pretty white scallop squash. And I really love it. I tried growing two varieties, which was the white and the green, like a minty green one. Um, and I was like forcing me to like trying to love it
And
because
you're
I
like,
was
it's
like,
not working out.
because
Yeah.
I'm like pushing towards the production of these plants. I'm like, come on, plant after plant after plant. They just kept dying. They would get to such a prolific stage and then just wither out. And I just kind of like forced myself to get more seeds and plant them out because I'm like, you're gonna grow today, you're gonna thrive. But it just didn't work out, and so I had to like put the seeds away and like call it a day
Yeah,
because it's like,
sometimes you just have to come to terms with it.
yeah.
And the vintage gardener says, I considered getting one of those. Glad I didn't get it. Yeah. I mean, I suppose there are people out there who like would love it. I just didn't think it was worth it. I feel like there are other things that you can put in your garden that will give you more. So,
Brooke, I did not deal with any squash bugs. I don't have squash bugs here in South Florida. What I deal with is the fact that they're very sensitive. If you're like it's like literally meaning if you're like a half a week or a week late, they will die on you. And just even during our peak season of growing our cucumbers and like squash in general, any type of like zucchini or crawling squash, anything like that, they just tend to wither out. They just perform very bad here in South Florida. You could give them new soil, plant them in containers, they just don't thrive. So what we resolved to was Seminole pumpkins, which is like a Florida variety, and those do perfect. They will like choke out your other plants, and give you nice sized pumpkins. But it's just I don't know why they aren't thriving in my garden for some weird reason. I know I've wanted to try to grow a white pumpkin, Casper. Um,
oh, I've seen those. They're really pretty.
yeah, I really like them. A company sent them out for me to grow them, but unfortunately, my very intelligent self, out of the many things I do in a day, I left my seed start my box of seeds outside, and like here it rains almost every single day. It got soaked on, and like half of my seeds were like no longer viable
Yeah.
because they like sprouted in the pocket. So I had, and one of those was the Casper pumpkin, so I have to wait until I get my hands on another one. But I definitely have to agree with you with that. If you don't like it and you're like kind of forcing yourself to like love it, but it's just costing you an arm and a leg to care for, just kick it to the curb.
Yeah, it's
Because
okay. It's okay to plant something that you spent money and time on and just say, you're out of here and
you
just,
gotta go.
yeah, you got to go.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with that. So one of the things I love to discuss about is plants that you are interested in growing, something that you haven't grown yet, but that you've seen and you're like, I want to grow that. So what is a plant or plants? Because I know that any gardener does not want to grow only one plant for in their garden. They want to grow multiple new ones that they've seen online or in their nurseries. What is a plant or plants that you want to grow that you haven't grown yet?
So, speaking of vintage gardener, are you there, Brooke? So, Brooke from the Vintage Gardener actually has a bunch of plants. She's started a nursery and she has a bunch of plants in her catalog that she'll be offering this season that are quite unique. They're not things that you can find necessarily in garden centers. They're items that are like specialty varieties and things like that. So I'm really interested to go see her when she's ready to have me over to come see her collection and grow some really unique items from her catalog. So that's something that I'm excited about this year, having like unique things that not everyone has. The other thing that I wanted to get into is more of like the permaculture plantings this year. So, like I was saying, there's one fence line in my garden that's like dead space because it's like an 8-foot alleyway. Yes, I am. I'm supposed to come this weekend, and I'm coming to get you. Brooke said, I think you're supposed to come this weekend. Yeah. Um, so I want to plant that whole alleyway with like all permaculture type stuff, like your fruit trees, your grapevines, your asparagus. I'll probably, because I can't help myself, add like cut flower garden type things there because it's like a big alleyway. I'm like, dahlias. Perfect for dahlias. So, just adding more permaculture items to that one alleyway in my side of the garden is what I'm really excited about. Something new.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree because when it comes to every year, I know there's certain companies or plant companies that are releasing new plants every single year. And in my spectrum or my side of things, I know that in agroforestry, I only focus on things that will grow that I'm able to eat or that are pollinator attractive. Because I won't grow something that's kind of useless. I used to be into like cut flowers and those ornamental type plants, but ever since I started up my nursery in permaculture, then I kind of had a shift in gardening. And so, like, I know one of the things I've been dying to grow in my garden is two varieties of guava, which they're not your typical like pink or white guava, because I already have both. I already have both growing in the garden and they're prolific. The ones I want to grow is strawberry guava, and the other one is called lemon guava. They're completely different
Oh,
plant
lemon guava
structures,
sounds so good.
right? They're completely different plant structures. The fruit is completely different, and the growth habits completely different. So I'm thinking that I will have more success with these guavas because here in South Florida they tend to get highly diseased. However, the
I would
production does
think
not
they
change.
would love it. I
Huh?
I thought they would love it.
They do love it, but they just get like badly diseased by like mealy bugs, black mold. Like they will have like four different diseases on it at the same time. However, that will not affect the plant's growth because they'll be flowering and fruiting at the same time, and the fruit does not change, which I really really like. But those are two varieties I've been like dying to eat to grow. And another one that I just got that my friend Sydney from Believe Tropicals, she works there. She like focuses on those rare house plants that you've been seeing going around. And one of the ones that she kind of like introduced us into is not really a house plant, it's more of an outdoor plant, which is the Florida variegated banana. I don't know if you heard of it,
Yeah,
but
I've seen them before at the garden centers here. They're really striking because they have those big
yeah.
leaves. Yeah, they're gorgeous.
Yeah, and they don't provide them down here in South Florida, surprisingly. Like I would think I would see them
Yeah.
like in mass in nurseries, but they don't. It's like rare to find one. We
Which
have
is
like
crazy because you guys can probably just grow them outdoors and let them be
yeah.
banana trees. Yeah.
Yeah, we have to actually get connected with a special grower in order to get them. And so Sydney from Believe Tropical, she's a grower of them. And I bought one from there and they cost a pretty penny. She helped me out, but they cost a pretty penny. They
Right.
are
Right.
very pretty penny. And so another variety that we're attempting to grow at the nursery is called nono or nono. It's literally Nono. And it's, imagine the Florida variegated, except it's not white variegated, if not pink with black variegation.
Oh,
And
that
the
sounds beautiful.
fruit is like a magenta color, like the peel is a magenta color. When it ripes, it gets like white stripes on it, which is really cool. And so I've been wanting to dying to get those, but there's just so many things in permaculture that you could grow that are just weird. Like
I
the
love odd things. Like I just want to grow the weird thing that people are like, "What?"
Yeah, I definitely have to agree. Like the plant that's our background is a sapodilla, and I've tasted the fruit before, and it tastes like cinnamon. Like it tastes like a cinnamon fruit, like straight up. Like it almost tastes like a pumpkin pie. And I was so fascinated, and I want this tree so badly. But there's so many things to grow. So now moving on to our last and final question for this week's episode is something I like to have all of the guests on on the podcast show is to give tips and advice for any beginner gardeners in general. So what are some tips and advice you could give to any beginner gardener who is willing to enter the garden industry but doesn't know where to start?
So for beginner gardeners, I would say the most important thing is to know from the beginning that you are not going to be successful at every single thing that you teach. And that's okay. But it's also a reason early on in your journey to plant easy things and go easy on yourself. If you want to challenge yourself and you're the type of person that doesn't get discouraged with not getting immediate gratification, that's fine. But if you're the type of person when you start a new hobby, like if you do it and it flops and it doesn't work out the way you thought and you just like forget it, I'll move on. If that's you, sometimes I can be like that. Start easy. You don't have to plant things from seed the first year. So for example, if you want to get into vegetable gardening, instead of going all out spending hundreds of dollars on soil and compost and a garden bed and growing everything from seed with the grow lights and the trays and the the heating pads underneath, it's okay. I didn't do that when I first started. You get a big giant plant, buy one bag of potting soil, go to the garden center, buy a pre-grown tomato plant, and put the dang tomato plant in the pot. Enjoy your tomatoes. Just for the 1 year that you're starting, enjoy the fruit of the labor. And then, you can go into these other things because if you're the type of person that just needs that immediate gratification, you may not get that with gardening because it's not always like that. I've killed plenty of plants. I'm a good gardener. I've killed plenty of plants though. So it happens. We all do it. So start slow, be easy on yourself, and just enjoy the ride, whatever that looks like for you.
I definitely have to agree with that because I know I've heard in many cases gardeners like, I didn't become a gardener for the main reason that I grew a cactus and it died. Well, is that your first and only plant that you grew? Because gardening is all about experimenting. I always call gardening experiments because you're always trialing out new things that you're wanting to grow, but you don't know how they might grow. Now, you might have your natives. Like here in South Florida, we plant a banana tree, an avocado tree, a mango tree, any of that, we'll know we're going to get success from that tree.
Right.
Now, depending on the variety is the production. However, any type of tropical fruit tree we know like is gonna grow. And I know for probably New Jersey, like camellias and stuff like that. You plant them, you'll know and expect new like success. However, if you're trying out something that there's not huge knowledge in your area about, don't get discouraged about it. Because for example, here in South Florida, I've tried growing hundreds and hundreds of hydrangeas, and every single one of them has flopped.
No, you're always trying with the
They flopped,
hydrangeas.
flopped. And so I'm actually getting ready to get a new variety that came out this year that I was put on the PR list for it, which is called the Eclipse hydrangea from First Edition Plants. And
Oh,
it's
I
like
haven't heard
this,
of it.
it's this like, it's a hydrangea microphylla, but it has these bright, like almost red flowers. And the leaves are like that dark, almost pitch black color. So the
So that's your
contrast,
jam then, because you like
very bad.
very dark flowers with the
Yes.
Yeah.
And so they're sending it out to me to grow. It's an experiment. I'm going to be babying that plant like crazy. But don't get discouraged in
Right.
general. Don't get discouraged because every professional gardener, even the ones who have a degree in agriculture or in whatever they studied in the field that they're studying, they have killed hundreds, if not thousands, of plants along their way. That's what makes you a better gardener throughout the times. These bigger gardeners like Laura from Garden Answer, Kevin Espiritu from Epic Gardening, these gardeners have killed hundreds of plants in order to learn what they're showcasing to their fans and to their audience. And so, like gardeners like me and Jennifer, although we have less time in the industry, like how they do, we still are learning along the way. And
Yeah.
that's how we're able to provide content and give tips and stuff like that because we learn from the mistakes that are given. Now, that's why us gardening educators are here to help you sometimes avoid those mistakes you might get and actually get success from that certain plant. But not all is going to be successful, but just never get discouraged. Just know that you have to keep rolling. If something's dead, out with out with the old and with the new. That's something that I always
Or
say.
if you don't like ornamental, go for houseplants. If you end up not liking
Mhm.
houseplants, try vegetables. It's not everybody. There's some people who don't like houseplants, but they love outdoor gardening, you know? So just find your little niche and go with it.
Definitely have to agree. Definitely fine because the garden industry is a huge industry. There's hydroponics, there's no dig gardening, there's ornamentals, there's permaculture, agroforestry, farming. There's so many branches of gardenings that you could actually look into that I feel like any upcoming gardener is gonna have the easiest way to find which one they'll have because you just gotta like plant yourself in one, figure out if you like it, don't move on to the next one. That's what I did.
Right.
It's not that hard to transition because a garden is never complete. It's always transitioning. That's what I always say. So, needless to say, I definitely have to agree with that big tip because that is the number one main tip I say is to never get discouraged. And so, that's going to be the wrap for this week's episode. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for joining with us
Yeah.
on this video. I can't wait to see what you'll be posting on your Instagram and YouTube. I'll be keeping up posted over there, as well as with our good friend Brooke from the Vintage Gardener. She has some very cool stuff going on right now, so make sure you go ahead and support her because she will be a guest on the show soon. I need to reach out to her for this upcoming season. So thank you so much, Jennifer, again for joining with us on this episode.
This is so much fun. Thank you for having me.
And we would love to have you back again when there's more for us to discuss about. So
Yes, maybe we
thank
can
you.
do one where I can show you what's going on outside or in
Yes.
the house.
Yes, I would love to see what's going on over there in your New Jersey garden. So thank you all so much for watching with us here in Growing Generations podcast. Next week will be our 10th episode. And so thank you all so much for joining with us. And once again, all of the information you need for Jennifer's links will be listed down below. It'll be updated soon. I still have to go through and update the description. So thank you all so much for joining with us on this episode, and we'll see you guys later. Bye, everyone.
Right.